Hey everyone, it's Jen with Spirited Saturdays, and this week we're talking about personal responsibility in recovery, looking at our power to care for and protect ourselves and recognizing that we can't change another's behavior, but we're responsible for changing our own and empowering ourselves. I think this is a great topic and one that a lot of people need to hear because it's one that talks about compassion for oneself. I think inherent within eating disorders is a tendency to take on an unfair amount of responsibility and assume that that we should fix things or fix situations. Often people who develop eating disorders develop them because in the past they were put into situations that were out of their control and perhaps were desperate to assume responsibility for themselves as a way for the situation as a way of solving the situation and protecting themselves and protecting others. Also, a tendency to merge with others is inherent in a lot in eating disorders. To lose sense of boundaries and to not know where you end and another begins. So often people develop eating disorders as a way of defining their boundaries because they have a hard time asserting themselves or as an attempt to be taken care of by another. And this isn't a blanket statement, obviously, but these are some contributors and some reasons. And so this need to merge with another in order to feel whole or in order to feel worthy is inherent or can be inherent in eating disorders and can contribute to the need to fix things at any stage of recovery. Fix things in your environment. Also, a contributor to developing an eating disorder could be a lack of an identity. And that's the same thing that can perpetuate the eating disorder. So the further in you get, the more lost and void of an identity you might feel, and the more you cling to the disorder to give you an identity and give you a role or a purpose or a goal. And so the further in you get, the more you lose yourself in every sense. So because of that, the more you rely on the eating disorder and the greater purpose the eating disorder serves, and so there becomes the vicious circle. And this need to protect others might at once have served a purpose, but no longer does. So in recovery, even when symptoms subside, even when the eating disorder thoughts subside, you might still have that inherent need to protect others that you've always had that contributed to the development of the eating disorder in the first place. And you might use it in recovery. You might use this need to protect. You might use it in your recovery in other ways, not necessarily through food. You might use it to try and help others, which can be good. Which the other thing about the eating disorder traits, another trait that people often have is that people with eating disorders can be very sensitive. And so this can be really good, and it can also be not so healthy. If used for good, this sensitivity when it comes to helping others can be experienced and communicated in the form of compassion. If used unhealthfully, this sensitivity can cause merging and taking on other people's problems as your own and putting another person before yourself. One of the principles of recovery is to assert your needs and put your recovery first. If helping another person is triggering you or you feel you're getting sucked in, then it's time to put up a boundary and get back to center and remember that you can't help anyone else until you help yourself. That might sound trite, but if you help another before helping yourself and you don't have the skills to deal with what might come up for you, then you might get drained. You might wear yourself out. And you might come to rely on that person too much to determine your own worthiness. For example, you might think if they're doing well, you're doing something right, or at least you're not hurting them. But if they're not doing well, then maybe that means you're doing something wrong and your worth can plummet. And so these things are false, obviously. But you might not really understand that or believe that. So you need to be in a place where you don't personalize their struggle. For example, if they reject your efforts, you would need to not react in a self-deprecating way and handle it in a healthy way instead. Whether that means accepting where they're at and referring them to somebody else or simply stepping away. Or changing something about the way you're approaching them. But whatever you decide to do, it can't be based on personalization of their struggle or personalizing the way they're reacting to you. It would have to be truly based on compassion for yourself, knowing what your limits are, knowing what you can and should be expected to handle at each stage for yourself, in general, and compassion for them, accepting that it's a struggle and that they might not be ready to receive your help or support. Compassion comes in the form of self-awareness. If you start to recognize that you're feeling badly about yourself, or you're feeling like you owe this person something, if you're starting to realize that this person is being codependent with you, or that you're being codependent with them, it means assessing this and choosing your next action based on this assessment, and not based on feeling pressured by them or yourself. Also, we have to remember that people reaching out for our help might not be in a place where they can recognize boundaries, and that it would be in their best interest if we didn't feed into that, but instead took wise and assertive steps toward establishing boundaries. Something you can do to center yourself every day is taking a few minutes each day, each morning, to breathe, to maybe do some yoga if that's not triggering for you. Sometimes it can be. But, anything that centers you, maybe meditation. And resolve to operate from a centered and wise place throughout the day. And any kind of self-healing technique can be really helpful. I do Reiki, and so I'll link you to some articles about that. But that means it's giving yourself and also others healing energy, and in a sense, and it can be used to build a kind of a protective shield or a cocoon or some kind of healthy boundary to protect yourself from negative feelings, negative energy that might come in. And this might allow you to help others without feeling like you're soaking up their energy like a sponge. And I'll link you to some articles about Reiki. I think it's always a good idea to have a support system in check, so that if you're feeling too much responsibility for another's recovery, you can reality check that or check in with someone else, either to better able yourself to help them, much like a therapist would talk to their own therapist, but know that you're not a therapist, unless you are, but that's a completely different topic. Or to run it by this person and get their outside opinion about whether you are in a position to help, and whether somebody is being codependent with you and you might not see it clearly. So you want to consult with them, check in with them. It's good to run this by another person because it can be a lot to take on, and it can feel scary and lonely when you feel like this person is relying heavily on you. It's important to remind yourself every day that no matter what, we owe it to ourselves to stay in recovery, and that whatever you're able to give to another is enough. Don't fool yourself into thinking that you can give more than you are able. And this could change. Get to know your limits and check in often, because as you progress, the limits might change and the ability to handle that pressure might change. But it never means that you yourself stop deserving support. No matter how well you get, you're always allowed to seek support. In fact, that is a sign of strength in recovery. Showing vulnerability to someone in the position to help you, asking, "Am I taking on too much?" is a sign of strength in recovery. And know that you are not selfish if you have to put up a firmer boundary. You're not selfish. You are taking care of yourself and protecting yourself and that person. If they don't know boundaries and you don't practice boundaries, someone is probably going to get hurt, because each person might feed off of the other one's lack of boundaries and become very codependent with one another. So take care of yourself, have compassion for yourself and others. You don't have to take care of others, but you can have compassion for them whether or not you're in the position to help. And so always remember to have that compassion for yourself and for others. And remember to take care of yourself, because you're worth it. Your recovery is worth it. You're always worth it, and you deserve it. You deserve that self-care. So have a great week and take care.